overall, I think a great season for Anthony Latina. And now he's got continuity going into this year. He returns, I believe, 11 scholarship players. He's got 14 scholarship players in this roster, with Alex Watson coming back as a super senior, utilizing his 5th year. And he's just got a wealth of talent, especially in the backcourt. So I think it's looking up for Sacred Heart, as Anthony Latina now has continuity, which is something he hasn't had in previous years due to all the up transferring.
What Coach Latina has is a group of players who know the system, know the verbiage, and can play together, which I think is going to be a huge advantage, because what we have, Ryan, is all these transfers going to different schools, putting some freshmen in as well. It takes time. Sacred Heart can get off to a great start, and they're led by one of the top backcourts here in the conference, Aaron Clark and Tyler Thomas. So talk about a little more in depth about those players coming back and why the leadership and the continuity is so very important for the Pioneers this year.
It's going to be a great test case because, you have Sacred Heart, you have St. Francis, PA, you have Merrimack, and you also have Wagner bringing back most of their roster, at least their top scorers in the league. So, but then you mentioned transfers coming into Bryant. They're coming in, Jalen Benjamin's coming to Mount St. Mary's. Isaac Conte is coming into LIU. So it's going to be an interesting test case to see these teams that return pretty much most of their rosters versus these teams that are kind of retooling through the transfer portal, which is also a wise thing to do if you can do it. But as far as the Sacred Heart backcourt this year, Tyler Thomas is one of the best players in the league. He is a Player of the Year candidate. If he could kind of capitalize on that consistency, as a freshman, they didn't need him because they had a deep backcourt. He kind of came off the bench, was instant offense. Last year, he needed to be the volume scorer for that team, and he really delivered 19 points per game, 5 rebounds. And was the most improved player in the league, led the NEC in scoring. So now he just needs to become consistent on a game in and game out basis, and Sacred Heart will be better for it. But with Aaron Clark, last year as a junior, he was off injured. He had a bad knee, and then Sacred Heart had a COVID pause in early February, and I think the 2 weeks off really helped Clark because he came back. He was much fresher. He was much quicker off the bounce. He was actually getting to the rim, which is where he thrives. That's his game, getting into the lane, but also shooting the three. I would argue he's more critical of Sacred Heart than Tyler Thomas. Last year in Sacred Heart's 9 wins, Clark averaged 18 points a game, was getting to the free throw line a ton. But in the Sacred Heart's 8 losses, he only averaged 9 points a game, was much less efficient. So Sacred Heart, they're 23-10 in the last 3 years when Clark hits double figures. So he's critical, and he, I mentioned best shape of his life. He's a lot trimmer. He's lost 15 pounds this offseason. He's really focused on staying there, being consistent with his health and being a guy who's going to be in the lineup every single day. And they need him because he's the point guard, he's facilitating. So you have Clark and Thomas, who are ball dominant guys, but then you supplement them with Mike Sixsmith, who made 54% of his threes last year as a freshman.
Ryan, I got to say something. I'm sorry. Yeah. Folks, if you don't know Mike Sixsmith, you have got to get to see this guy shoot. He ended up going from three-point range. He was 32 of 59. That's 54%, as Ryan said. He's 91% from the free throw line. One of the best shooters in the country, period.
Yeah, and so the challenge now is he was super selective. So one thing, Sixsmith, he's a great shooter, but he's also got a tremendously high IQ, great court awareness. He's really great at positioning himself both on offense and defense. I love, he's always looking one pass or one play ahead. He's got the ability to do the skip pass and, the dribble drive, the attack closeouts. But now he's got to become more aggressive. He can't be as selective. Last year I believe he averaged only 4.5 field goals per game. He's got to bump that number up to at least 6 or 7 per game, because it's great that he takes open shots and he makes them, Mike, but he's also got to, kind of take the semi-open shots, and because those are better shots than most players in this roster. And so you want him to be a little less selective, be a little more assertive, and maybe take some of the scoring load off of Tyler Thomas and Aaron Clark and make them a little more efficient as well.
Where do you see this team coming in this year? Obviously every coach wants to understate it and they want to say one game at a time. But I think Sacred Heart is a team that can really compete and sneak up here. They may not get high in the preseason rankings. They may look to some of these other schools like Bryant, for example. But when you have this group coming back and you have an advantage, Ryan, inside, I think your mid-major teams that really can hit the boards and play well inside is such a huge advantage because you have veteran guards. You have solid guard play. So talk about the balance here with Sacred Heart and why they are such a difficult matchup when they get going within the conference.
Yeah, so I think the biggest question is, like you mentioned, the front court. So, Contavio Dutrell is one of the best rebounders in the country last year. Had the eighth best defensive rebounding rate, the third best offensive rebounding rate in the country. So he's got a great nose for the basketball, but he's a 20-minute per game player. He's a guy who's going to foul you a lot. His fouls are going to go up a lot per game. So he's a high energy guy. So you supplement him with Zach Pfaffenberger. He's coming off a torn Achilles last preseason. If him and Dutrell can have a timeshare at the five, I think that's really going to help Anthony Latina kind of sort out the rest of this rotation. The key though is the freshman to sophomore jump. You have guys like Bryce Johnson, Nico Gillette, Mattis Spokus. Those guys, they're guys who could play at the four. And the four man was kind of a weak spot for Sacred Heart last year. They ran a lot of guards. Sometimes they'd run 3-4 guards out there at a time, but they didn't have a true stretch forward, especially at the four spot. So I think if Bryce Johnson and Mattis Spokus, those are kind of the two candidates who could take that fourth position, be a little bit stronger. Spokus kind of struggled rebounding the basketball. He's got to work on that, but I think Bryce Johnson really has a chance. He's got kind of Draymond Green tendencies. He's very skilled at the four. He could shoot it. He could stretch the floor a little bit. He could pass it. He could break defenders down off the dribble, and he's also a good rebounder, as we saw in a limited sample size last year. So we already know Sacred Heart's got a strong backcourt. We already talked about Clark Thomas, Six Smith, and then Alex Watson as well as kind of a do-everything combo. I think if Bryce Johnson could really step up and solidify that four spot, and then you have, like I said, a good timeshare with Dutrell and Pfaffenberger at the five, I think they definitely can sneak up. And as far as where they project, right now, Mike, I have Wagner and Bryant. You talked to Jake a couple days ago. I have Bryant and Wagner as my teams in the top tier, and then Sacred Heart's in tier number two. You could probably throw in Merrimack, you could throw in LIU, and a couple other teams as well. But I think they're right there. I think they have a legitimate possibility to break into the top four of the league in the regular season, and that's really where you want to be, because that means you're going to host an NEC tournament quarterfinal game come March.